We have, we're now official. I think we're live, and want to welcome everyone that is listening in from the general public and all of you that have been able to zoom in to our April 28th Board of Education workshop, 4 o'clock today. We will call it to order and ask everyone to put everything on silent or mute, whichever is better for you. And then Miss McDonald has our flag ready, and I'm going to ask her, since she has the flag, after I do the prayer, that she will lead us in the pledge. Okay. So let's open up with a word of prayer. Father, Lord, I just thank you for this day. Lord, I thank you for Griffin-Spalding County School System. We pray for your wisdom and direction in all the business and things that we are doing. Lord, I thank you, Lord, for our community, our families, our teachers, our students, our faculty. Father, Lord, I ask, Father, Lord, you continue to bless them. Lord, continue to bring peace and comfort in this kind of troubling times. We pray, Father, Lord, for continued healing to come. And we pray, Father, Lord, for anyone that is sick at this time, Lord, that you will tell Ms. McDonald anything.
I just want to say thank you. You and I spoke earlier, and I learned a lot through the conversation. I appreciate the opportunity to further understand that, like Centel. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a suggestion, because I think everybody was, I guess, trying to be cordial or whatever, because I was one that was, but I think if anything that we have a vote on, we use the proper methodology that's in place. Is just we need to start just asking if there's any discussion before we take the vote. Yeah, I think that will kind of dispel any of that apprehensiveness that any person may have, and may have something to say. If we'll just put that out there, that I think that'll help out that situation.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I also have a question. Maybe this is geared towards Tim. According to Robert's Rules of Order, will you be able to ask for discussion before taking a vote, or is that left up to the discretion of the chair, Tim?
Actually, the consent agenda should be by unanimous consent. So if a board member has an item that's on the consent agenda that they either want to have discussion on or feel like that they can't vote for, that particular item should be pulled out of the consent agenda and then put on the agenda under action items.
And we'll handle that one individually.
Right.
Yes, correct.
Right. Yeah, that's been the practice we've used over the years.
Absolutely.
It is.
Okay. Well, we will definitely do that going forward. So, board members, I would entertain a motion to adopt our agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Chair, I want to just make a comment before we do the adoption of the agenda. I just want to be clear as it relates to item 3, presentations and discussions, that in item 2, purchasing and bidding contracts, that the superintendent will do some type of report, because I've been on this soapbox since I've been elected, since we started this conversation in equity about how contracts are done in our school system on a monthly basis, as it relates to how when our agenda is sent out, the extensive research I do as it relates to these items on the agenda, and looking at persons who are bidding for contracts or that they're asking the board to approve. And so I just want to make sure that the superintendent in so that that we're clear, because I've been clear in my emails that I sent on January 26th, clear in my presentation I made on January 26th, clear in my email on January 29th, and my email on February 11th. So I just want to be clear that we're going to have a discussion and start talking about the way that we're doing this as it relates to minorities and black and brown owned businesses will have a fair chance in this process. I don't want us to sit here on this meeting and fluff and just talk about purchasing and bidding contracts. I want us to come up with a solution, want us to come up with a process want us to start that conversation so that minorities, veterans, women, and Black and brown business owners will have the opportunity, the fair opportunity to do business in this school district.
Okay, I think that is what today the presentation should be, to let us know what we are doing so that we can facilitate that discussion going forward of what it needs to look like.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
So I had a motion. Did I have a second?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion on accepting the agenda? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we will move then on to Ms. Sarah Jones. I'm assuming she was able to join us for our update on the curriculum audit.
Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Jones is having difficulties right now, so she is not ready.
Okay, so
Can we just move to item 2?
all right, we'll move to item 2 and we'll start with our purchasing bidding contracts. Mr. Smith.
Actually,
right.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a comment before the superintendent speaks on this item.
Okay.
I would like to come on this agenda item before the superintendent speaks on this item. Since my election to the Board of Education, this item, as I just made in my comments, has been something that I am passionate about. As you know, as elected members of this body on January 29th, I sent an email to each elected representative of this body and the superintendent regarding equity in contracts. When I look around, I am elated that I am surrounded by other leaders who recognize the sufferings of today, especially given the pandemic. The fact is that our district has a scholar enrollment of 10,207 scholars approximately. We know that 48.2% of that scholar makeup is African American. We know that 37.6% is white, 9.27% is Hispanic, while 6.0% are of another ethnicity. Too few contracts are awarded to local, small, veterans, women, Black or brown-owned business owners. I want us to fully analyze and think about the disparities that we have in our school district. Ask yourself, how can you, as an elected member of this body, help our school to engage, our district to engage, empower, and excel on so many levels? It is my belief that we cannot wait until our district develops an equity policy. We must be proactive and address these challenges together, as we have done during the COVID-19 pandemic. So many may ask, how do you know? Each agenda that is sent out, I go through it thoroughly. It is my elected responsibility to make sure that I am aware of the information provided, and when voting, I have all the information needed to make that vote. I research the companies by visiting their websites. I take it a step further and look at the LinkedIn of each of these companies' leadership. Through this, I constantly see the disparities in contracts. Every meeting, I bring this up. Black and brown scholars, employees, and stakeholders are constantly overlooked and get the short end of the stick. This body has the ability to make procedures and practices equitable across the board. Now is the time to act. There are many challenges, but if we all come together, we can utilize the 4 great words that we know in our school district: grow, sustain, collaborate, and succeed. We can grow, sustain, collaborate, and succeed to define our work in education, to shape our plans for this district, and to ensure the highest level of achievement of our scholars, all while yielding to the greatest success of our community. We must come up with a way to track local, small, veterans, women, and Black and brown-owned businesses. We must also reach out to our community to provide them with information on how they can do business with this school district. We must also ensure that while doing business with the school district, we must reflect the demographics of the scholars and stakeholders we serve. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. I look forward to the superintendent providing information on how we can improve on these disparities in a complex arena of human relations to help us make choices on the side of inclusion, not exclusion. I yield the balance of my time.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
All right, thank you. We do want to talk today about vendor procurement, because this is really not about bidding and getting products itself as much as it is about reaching a larger, broader range of vendors who may wish to do business with the school district. And those could either be minority or women-owned businesses, Mr. Brown mentioned, or various categories that some we may want to be reaching out to in a broader way if we don't think that we're getting there. So this presentation is really going to start off with what we're currently doing in the way of purchasing and vendor procurement, if you will. And then we're going to, we'll talk through several areas that deal with a lot of buying, a lot of vendors, and how they work on getting their vendor list up to date or available for use as they do it. And then we'll also talk about some options that we've been looking at on things that we can do to get the word out better in the community, and maybe reach a broader section of our community, both inside the county, outside these minority and women-owned businesses. All right, Joan, if you want to go to the next slide. So
if I can interrupt for just a second, I think Mr. Brown, something in your microphone keeps having you come up. If you could possibly mute until he's finished.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
So thank you. So we're going to start by looking at the purchasing policy, and then look at the areas of maintenance, instructional technology, transportation, and then some other ideas and some other areas that we do purchasing in and deal with vendors in, and then talk about some next steps that we've have brainstormed, identified, but also then get the input from the board and direction from the board on where you would like to see us go with this whole process. So, Joan, if you go to the next one. This slide kind of recaps our purchasing policy, which is DJE. The only preference outline in the policy is a 5% local preference that we can give on locally funded type of purchases. I don't believe this includes federal or nutrition. Is not allowed to do the 5% local preference. But if you look down the list on where we're required to get bids and how many and how they're approved, you can see that down to $25,000, bids must be received either verbally or in writing, and you can see the approval level either at the site itself or all the way up to the superintendent for less than 25. Anything that is above $25,000 must come to the Board of Education for that purchase to be approved. It's basically an approval to expend the money, but we've used that to get that approval on those items above that 25,000. All right. So I think our next one is going to be the maintenance department, which has probably as many purchases, uses as many vendors as anybody. So I want to ask Bruce to kind of go through what he does in terms of identifying vendors for use in his purchasing area, just so you can kind of get an idea of where we are right now.
All right, thank you, Jim. Yeah, we have tried over the years to open up things and follow the policies and procedures that's set up by the school system as we move forward. In addition to that, over the years, we've also been required to go in and actually put our bids and request for proposals and stuff within the Georgia Procurement Registry. Currently, that has limits of anything over $100,000 is required that you put it in. You can put smaller purchases in that format as well. A couple of years ago, they had dropped that cost threshold down, and we were having to put anything over $10,000 in the procurement registry. So we used to have a lot more items that would go in there. So again, following the Georgia guidelines and the way what they put out there for us to do. One of the things that has come into play a number of times over the years as we've worked with and solicited local companies was just the amount of insurance coverage that's required. That's something, again, that's required by our insurance company that lay out what the requirements are. And then also a number of years back, the state began requiring that anyone to do business with a public agency had to be e-verified. And so you have to go online there to the state database and fill out documentation to get a e-verification number. that has to be submitted and provided when any business does work with us. And then, of course, any project that's over $100,000 also has to be bonded. So we have in the past had companies to say they weren't interested because it had to be bonded or so forth. So those are, again, just requirements that we have to go through as a public entity doing work in Georgia. Again, over the years, we've put the opportunities out there. We've had a number of companies call us, contact us, and express an interest that, hey, we do this kind of business. We'd like to be included in your bid process, or if you have any RFPs come out. And if they call us, contact us, we add them to the database. Currently, I have a database that has about 3,400 contacts in it. From people over the years, and just contacts people we do work with, I do work with, and just out there, and they're listed out by the type of work they do. And when they've called us and we put out a bid or an RFP that relates to that, we try to go through that database, and in addition to posting it on our website, the procurement registry, where it's required, we'll also either try to call or send them an email just to make them aware that we have posted a bid or RFP that they might be interested in.
Bruce, let me ask you a question. Throughout this database that you have, do you know how many roughly, and I'm probably sure you do not, do you know in this database roughly how many of there are minority-owned businesses, veterans, women, or black or brown business owners?
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head. I don't have it actually set up with that as a category in there. There are a number of them. There are a number of them that, that we do business with.
When you say a number of them, who are you speaking of?
The minority owned companies you're speaking of.
All right, so can we say minority then instead of them?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So anyway, then going on through here, as we talked about, based on the scope of the work, we get to those guidelines that we have to put it on the Georgia Procurement Registry. It's a requirement, a state requirement. If it's smaller than that, we can certainly, advertise on our website, or reach out to people, as was, again, Jim was pointing out, or Mr. Smith was pointing out, with the requirements that are laid out in our guidelines. And then we do, we try, part of the procurement policy does lay out that that we try to standardize on commonly used things. So, we do that. It's a big help. Like, we look at our alarm systems, camera systems. We just, the board had approved a large camera upgrade just at the last meeting. And those are things, again, where we're trying to use consistency throughout our system, where we can tie it all in, implement the equipment, bring it online, be able to access it from remote locations and stuff as seamlessly as possible, in case there's a problem or an emergency that comes up. So, those type of things we try to use consistency. Again, custodial supplies. We keep the same custodial supplies at the various schools. We only offer certain ones, and we provide those, but we want everybody to be using the same thing. We don't want it to be an issue where we have a school out there that one says, oh, well, because they use this product, their school looks better, or they have that. We want to take that question out. We want to use consistent product, and then it becomes a people scenario and not a chemical or material situation. And then, of course, keys and hardware and things like that are also important, that we have consistency out there because of the vast number of locks and keys we have, and having mechanisms where we can limit the number of master keys and be able to get through and get into areas that we need to do. Now, over the years, we've come a long way. When I first started in this, and we didn't have the World Wide Web to reach out to get prices and availability and stuff. And now that it's out there, it's something that we're on every day. As we need parts, equipment, PPE, different supplies we need for the COVID pandemic, and sanitizing schools. We're out there searching the web. We're looking up who has what the prices are, what's availability, and that's part of it. Just reaching out and seeing what's available, seeing the cost. So we have to deal with that, and then. Again, we also use state contracts, consortiums, other cooperative purchasing agreements that are allowed by the policy and procedures. If it proves that it is a cost and time benefit, it would get what we need. And then additionally, when we're out there, we have a large HVAC unit or something goes down, we have to look at where we can get the parts the quickest and hopefully for the best price to get in here and get it back going. So again, that's the things that we're looking for as we move forward out there. But again, we're happy to include anybody that will talk with us and wants to tell us what they do and work with us. We've had a number of them over the years and try to do that. Again, we do a lot of things through general contracts, big construction projects and all. Of course, those are out there on the procurement registry. I know in the past there's been discussions, are there possibilities to maybe encourage the use of local vendors, local subcontractors and stuff for those. And we have a number of the general contractors we use. They have utilized those different companies and stuff in the past, but again, that's being promoted but handled through them. Our contract is with the general contractor, so we can make recommendations and encourage them, but then at the end of the day, they're the ones that actually have the contract with the subcontractor. So then we kind of work through that. But they have used a number of the local companies and vendors over the years as we before. So,
Bruce, I have another question for you.
Yes, sir.
You were saying that you have this database. What data points are used, or what information do you have in the database that would be able to, I guess, let the board know and let the general public know what the minority businesses are doing business with the school system? Is there anything that you have that you're able to say that this is a small business, or this is a minority business, this is owned by a veteran, this is owned by a woman? Do you have anything that's able to capture that information? Because I know that I spoke with Max, let me let you answer that question, and then I'll give you the follow-up.
Okay. Again, the way it's basically just the contacts database, and so what it has generally is the person's name, the company, phone numbers, emails, and what type of business they do. That's what generally I've captured over the years in that. But yeah, I do have they're knowledgeable of like I say, several minority companies that do work with us and that do a fair amount of work with us, and we can certainly begin to if we want to now go that route and keep up with that. We can certainly note the different ones that are working on the projects and stuff, but really it's just hasn't been something that's been requested before, so we haven't been necessarily tracking it in that manner.
And so let me follow up, Mr. Chair, if I could follow up. When I spoke with you about a system that could track that, I remember you saying that you had a conversation with the superintendent and that there is a system that could be used to track that information. Do I remember that correctly?
That is my understanding. If we deem that that is what we want to begin doing. I realize that is what you want to begin doing, but we need to have some conversations around the logistics of what does that look like? How does that, does it put us at risk if we begin gathering that information? I know Mr. Shepard was looking into some of that information also, just so that when we are ready for those conversations, that we can dive into them.
All right, Tim, are you able to speak to, I guess, the legal situation of being able to track that information?
If I'm figuring out how to unmute myself. Centel, I'm not aware of any legal impediment to actually tracking the information. It's a totally different issue, though, if you're talking about a system of minority preferences and awarding contracts. You've got a real issue with the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment if you start to do that. But tracking, I'm not aware of any reason why we can't legally do that.
So in this discussion, I'm looking at being able to track because because we see that there's a disparity, right? And so what I want to do is try to be able to let the general public know the information that's there. And if they have that information, it's on them, minority-owned businesses, to determine whether they're going to, put in the information. I just want to be sure that the information is out there and that we are able to track, because in a district our size and the demographics of our district, I just still wholeheartedly believe the facts are the facts, and wholeheartedly believe that we must do business that is diverse. And you can't say, well, one contract here, one contract there. I just want us to be able to start capturing that information.
Okay. I definitely hear you, and I want to make sure that I have a couple of questions for Bruce also, and some of the other board members might, but I want to make sure that we give them opportunity to finish before we continue moving on.
So are you saying now that there'll be no other further questions during the presentation? Is that what you're stating?
No, not at all. I think you made your point about what you're looking for and what you would like to see happen. And I hear you. And so I have made note of that, but I want them to continue with all of the information of what we have so that we can get all of our questions answered.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and so again, if we want to start tracking that information, and if that's the way we end up wanting to go with this and decision, there's certainly within the data that I gather on companies and information that we put out there and we request within our bids and proposals we put out, we can have that question in there. I mean, a lot of times the companies will tell us if they are a minority company, to start off with. But we can have that as a question that's spelled out there, and gather that information as we take the bids and stuff. If we need to going forward, if that's what's determined, the way to go forward, it shouldn't be a problem. I will say that on the we talked about the Georgia Procurement Registry and the information with that, and again, you can go in there and get information on the companies as well, and you can find out in there, as far as if they're minority-owned companies and so forth. So that's another mechanism that you can glean some of that information on those other bids that we take that we tie in through the Georgia Procurement Registry.
Mr. Chair,
Roger?
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, I believe that the program that we have does allow us to capture that information. It's just a matter of going back and collecting it, or collecting from this point forward, or rebuilding that database. I think as we go through the next couple of areas, instructional technology and maintenance, and see and transportation, how they handle it, I think ultimately the question is going to be is, how do you want to use this data? I think that's where I think collecting the data is probably not going to be the big issue. I think the question for the board is going to be, how do you want this data used? So, but if there are any other questions for Bruce, please get those. Ask what you want to ask.
So you said that other departments may be doing something to track it, but maybe maintenance is not. So there's not a uniform system across the district.
No, that's not. No, I wanted to go through the other two departments that do a lot of purchasing, and have a lot of vendors. So you see what they do, how they have collected vendors for their purposes. And then we can determine how to, no, they're not doing anything differently as far as tracking minority businesses, women business than anybody else is.
So then the question becomes, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it not under the purview of this board to set policies and procedures in place that so where that can happen? Just asking.
It is.
Okay, thank you so much.
And so I have a question for Mr. Bruce before we move on. Do we have I'm just going to put a how-to page, the simple, what does it mean to be e-verified? So if you had a small business that is trying to break into working with the school system or something like that, that explains all of that, or is that something that they have to search out and learn on their own?
Well, basically, we will generally refer them to the state because, again, it's a state-operated program. They have to go online with them to fill out the information. So the state has definitely, you can go in there, Google E-Verify, and they give you various information. What we put in our bid packages and forms is, again, a forms kind of that are sent out through the state that they recommend putting out there that says that, the company is e-verified and requires them to put their data in, pertinent data in there where we will know that they meet the qualifications. But yes, sir, we usually just refer them to the state website.
Okay. Any other board members have questions for Bruce before we move on?
I do.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sue.
All right. Thank you, Centel. Hi, Bruce.
Hey.
Of the 3,400 that of the 3,400 companies you have in your database, never mind. What is the reason that a company, and I know there's probably going to be a long answer, what is the most often reason that a company doesn't meet the state specs or the county specs?
Generally speaking, in the past, it's usually been that they didn't have e-verify, which then they can certainly go in there and get it if they qualify, or they didn't have the insurance requirement.
That's what I thought.
Again, I'll give you an example. When it comes to cutting grass, for example, and we put out bids to have the lawn care taken care of around the school district. And, the thing we've looked at over the years, is these companies coming in and bid. We've had companies that can do the whole job. They're large enough and they're capable of doing everything. But now we don't want to always go that route. Matter of fact, right now we have two different companies that do the work. And part of the reason is because during rainy seasons and stuff like we've had recently, or you have storms, it's hard for them to keep up. So sometimes it's good to have more than one.
Sure.
And so we've generally, like to open it up, and we'll let people come in if they want to bid on fewer projects. They want to bid on 3 or 4, they can do so, or bid on that. But so often the companies have come back and told us, and we have had some that bid on it, but by the time they, just bid a few of them, with the cost of the insurance requirements that we have, it's really cost prohibitive in a lot of cases for them to come in and just do a few jobs. And
okay.
So, they can go do other jobs around town for people that aren't requiring as much insurance or the insurance. And so, and as far as our other contractors, we have several, say, HVAC contractors and a few others in town that do commercial work. And we oftentimes reach out to them, give them the opportunity, see if they want to bid on projects that we have and so forth. Occasionally they will. But a lot of times, they tell us that the margin of that they can get working for us, a margin of profit is not what it normally would be out there working for doctors' offices and other businesses in town. So they choose not to bid.
Okay.
So when we've gone out and asked them, that was what they told us why. So anyways, those are a couple, several things we've seen and heard over the years. But otherwise, like I said, we're happy to have them if they'll want to participate.
Thank you.
I guess because I'm gonna have to go back through this presentation, Mr. Chair, and I won't even ask that on here. I'll ask it in the email. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other board members before we move on?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I've sat and listened, and I hope the newer board members, excluding Ms. Cook, don't think this is something new. This has been a subject that previous board member and myself have brought up, because we have a businessman right here in our community who is a very active community businessman that has done major work in Atlanta, on the Dome, the Hawks Arena, things of that nature. And he was one in specific that I've had conversation with about why was he never a major part of the construction of schools in our district. Now if he was able to do work in Atlanta and all around Atlanta, and there's a plethora of things that he has done, but he was not able to be a major player in the building of facilities in our system. So this subject is nothing new.
But it seems like it's getting.
Well, Mr. Brown, I sat here patiently and let everybody finish. Let me finish. And what I was saying is, this is an issue for me because I've talked to different cities. We have people that have worked in Spalding County that are county managers, major executives in Metro Atlanta cities, and I asked them what do they do, and for some reason we have never gotten to the point where we publicize or put it out there some of the criterias that these cities don't have a problem making exceptions so that minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned companies will have a fair playing ground to be able to procure some of the contracts. And so what, I applaud this being brought back up, but it's nothing new. We just haven't moved the needle on this, and I'm just giving you information of what I know, not what I've heard. You have a lot of minority-owned businesses that will not even put in a bid because of the all of the red tape and things that they are put through to be able to place their bids or be a major player for contracts. They rather bypass it and just keep moving on to the communities north of us, because they don't have to deal with the things they have to deal with when dealing with Griffin-Spalding County community. So I say that to let you know what the history is, because I've been here, I've seen the history. It's not a new subject, but I agree with Mr. Brown. We need to do something to show that we are doing things fair and equitably, because we have whether it's true or not, the assumption is what does the damage, and that's the major thing that people believe, is that we are not a very friendly I guess organization, for lack of a better word, to do business with. And that's why they don't even go through the trouble of trying to get contracts, because they haven't been successful before. I've had people that have approached about grass contracts, things of that nature, smaller things, nothing major. It didn't have to be a building project that was going on, just everyday operational things. But they shy away from even getting into the game that we have set up, because it is so hard to be a major player or even to win. So they rather move on and not deal with Griffin-Spalding County, and they'll just go north of us, and where they have better success and they have a lot less pushback or stumbling blocks or obstacle, whatever word you want to choose to use. They rather do that than to go through all of the rigmarole that we have in place here. So that needs to be known by all the board members, because this is nothing new. Don't think this is something new that Mr. Brown has brought up. It's been brought up years ago when we were really building schools and all these new middle schools, you see the new high school, and that's when it was really a hotbed issue. But don't think that this is something new. This is something that has been an issue on the table but hasn't been resolved. We haven't done anything, in my opinion, proactively to even try to invite or bring to the table minority businesses. And you know, sometimes you have to market yourself to put that invitation out there. And see, we don't do that. We haven't done that. So I just want to make that known to everyone, so that everybody will have some realistic facts on the history of this issue.
Okay, thank you.
And I thank you for the years that you've been on the board and bringing this up. But I think now we really have an opportunity where we can move the needle on this issue. And I appreciate you and Mr. Kendall for speaking truth to power and holding people accountable. But I think now we have the ability. We're having the conversation and it's in the public now. And so now I think we actually can move on this. And so I thank you, Mr. Holmes, for all you're doing. And I'm sorry for cutting you off as well, Leader Holmes.
Oh, no problem. You know how I am.
Yes, sir.
Well, we want to continue to move forward. We do have, several topics to discuss today. I'm not ending this, but I'm going to move on to Mr. Smith and the other two departments that he wanted to share.
Yes.
And board members, it may be that we are not able to come to anything today, and we may have to even at some point may table it even to our next week's meeting if we need to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's true. We can continue this, but I do want to go back to that idea of perception. I think Mr. Holmes is correct. Perception many times is what rules the day. Sometimes it's not exactly what you're doing, but it's the perception of what people think you're doing. So whether our procedures have items in it that are viewed as stumbling blocks, or whether they simply are items that certain contractors can't meet, as Bruce mentioned earlier, that's open for a review of our procedures. We certainly don't mind doing that to see if there's something that we're adding that's not necessary. And if that's the case, then we certainly want to make adjustments for things that aren't necessary, but we're going to do the things that protect the school district as well in terms of the purchasing process. So I think that's open for review, and we certainly don't mind doing that. I do want to turn it over to Lonnie real quickly for Instructional Technology. So Lonnie, talk us through some of those purchases and vendors.
Certainly, thank you. The bulk of our budget in regard to our purchases are usually our E-rate purchases. Those are federally funded, which is tied to our free and reduced numbers. Because of that, they do have to bid through what's called the USAC portal. That really covers all of our Verizon phone service, our wide area network, walls, infrastructure equipment, switches. I mean, it's a lot of money when you start talking about the cost. And so there are a lot of rules in place about who can bid on those projects, but all of that is managed for us by E-rate representatives. So really our process to just list out the products that we're looking for, the types of bids we're looking for as far as equipment services. I want, you know, a wide area network with 2 gig switches between schools, a 10 gig pipe, you know, these different specifications. Then the E-rate specialist bids that through the USAC portal, and we rate those bids. And that's how we choose our winners in those. And so it's all facilitated through USAC. The rest of our purchases, which would be like our Chromebook purchases we just did, a lot of smaller equipment repair companies for our Chromebooks and other products. We kind of like what Bruce was saying. I just keep a spreadsheet of everybody, because I get a lot of emails in the course of a day or a week from different companies that want to do business with Griffin-Spalding County Schools. And so I have conversations with those companies and letting them know that, you know, we're not currently looking for services, or we may be, or like with our Chromebooks, we'll be doing our bids in the spring. And so when we do get to those types of situations, I give all of them the opportunity to bid. I reach back out to them and say, you know, here's our bid request packet. But also those same bid packets we run through the USEPTA portal, which is the Educational Technology Purchasing Alliance for the South and the Eastern parts of the United States. So when I ran that Chromebook bid through, you know, you have the option to go in and select specific companies you want to bid. Or you can just say, I want all companies that provide Chromebooks that are hosted in this portal to provide bids on. I did go back last week and talk to Landon, who's one of the associates at USEPTA, and talked about him as far as any kind of data about minority-owned businesses. He stated that they don't require people to list that. And so it's not something that's just available on their site. He said, but if you go through the bid process, you can request that information from the people when you do their bid, that if you want to know that kind of demographic information as far as ethnicity, women-owned or veteran-owned businesses.
Okay.
Any questions for Bonnie, board members?
Nope.
All right, Ms. Smith.
All right, let's go to transportation and Todd Harris. Todd? I think Todd's in there.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure. I didn't see the indicator. Yeah, transportation, the procurement and purchasing processes for us kind of breaks down into several categories, and I'll explain them. First is equipment. And by equipment, I mean school buses, say trucks or cars or vehicles. The bid process is pretty easy now. There's only 3 bus vendors in the country. So they are involved in that process, but we used to have to get closed bids on those. You know, we would put out you know, an RFP, and we would say we're looking for X amount of vehicles, put our specs out there. We would get closed bids and then open up at a date of our choosing. Now, starting about 6 years ago, school buses are all bid annually. They are solicited by Department of Administrative Services for all 3 providers, or all 3 vendors who build, manufacture school buses. And those are set out annually. And it's the same thing for our vehicle purchases we make, based on the type of vehicle, whether it's a car, truck, SUV, whatever it may be. Those are all bid out at the first of the year, and it has given us, it's extended the school systems a big savings, and the increase in the price of buses has gone down substantially, but that is how we purchase equipment. It's all annually bid through the State Department of Administrative Services, and we take those bids, just like practically every other school system in the state. So, and obviously that is our, you know, when it comes to equipment, that is the largest purchase in our department is definitely the buses. So 3 vendors, DOES contracts, and that's how that's how those bids are that's how we get the cost, and they also bid options on them. So whether individual systems may choose to do something specific type tire, they may choose something different in the paint. All that is bid by the vendors as well. So those costs are broken down in the state contracts for bids and the vehicles as well. Another one of our larger purchases is fuel, obviously. So our fuel we don't lock in contracts with any fuel companies. That is not an uncommon practice, but in my experience, I think we use the wiser method by spot bidding fuel purchases at the point of purchase. So twice a week, we get in a load of 7,500 gallons, and a few days before we need it, we put it out to there's basically 4 providers in this region that pull from the pipeline that can deliver it to us. Walthall and Petro South, those companies, and when we put out the request, they send us a bid, and we get them from all 4. They could be a penny apart, half cent apart. We generally go with obviously from savings, we go with who's the cheapest at the time. Service does play a part in it, but we do make sure we purchase some from all the vendors throughout the year. Even if it's a half a cent higher on a specific loads, simply because if there's any kind of emergency situation, i.e. like we ran into with Katrina, where delivery from a pipeline becomes an issue, some vendors may have access at certain times, some may not. So you want to keep all in your wheelhouse, so to speak. So if you tied in with one company with one contract and they're out of fuel, can't move it in certain situations, you don't want to be there, especially on school systems. So, but yeah, there's only just a handful of available providers that can bring us the fuel, but we spot bid that at the point of purchase. A couple of days before, we put it out there and we get the bids in by email. Our other purchases, and again, there's really nothing in our department, in our operation, that we maintain under a contract. Outside of the copy machine, which is done at the district, we do have contracts on our software, contracts, but our license and agreements annually, and those are for our routing system and for the cameras we use on buses. We just technology support on those. But after the fuel, another channel of purchasing for us is now we're getting into parts and repair. And that kind of comes in 2 channels. We have at cost that we use on older vehicles, and then we have warranty. Vehicles in 5 years and less and certain mile radius obviously are under warranty. And the warranty is awarded by it's kind of like a dealership for this region. So if we buy a bus type X, we have to buy it from this dealership. It's the only one available in Georgia. So the only one that sells them in Georgia. So if whoever we buy from or type bus, then i.e. they are the ones you go to for the warranty. They perform the warranty work themselves. So then the other cost would be buses that are out of warranty that we pay all of the repair costs and all of the repair parts. Our parts come from several vendors. We price the small, and when I say parts, we're talking about like that are non-specific to a specific type of bus or engine. If I'm going to buy a part for a Caterpillar engine or a part for a Cummins engine or this transmission, obviously there's only a few I could buy. It's only available from a certain few. But when it comes down to belts, light bulbs, the maintenance type thing, tires, obviously those type purchases, similar to Bruce, we have a vendor list that has contacted us and that we have reached out to through web service, through web searches, I should say, and word of mouth in our industry. If somebody's getting great service and great prices, it spreads pretty quick. So anytime we're making those purchases, it's based on we need the parts. We don't want buses down, so service is big, and obviously price. But that is a small part. It's not a contract purchase, but those are our 3 categories, really 4: at cost parts and repair, warranty, it obviously goes back to the person warranting the bus. The fuel we purchase, we spot bid it weekly with all available vendors in this area. And then all our purchasing and equipment, buses and vehicles are done Department of Administrative Services through the state, as opposed to closed bids. And we started that, I guess most school districts started that about 7 years ago when it became available through DOAS. We do maintain a list of local vendors for our schools who get single trip contracts and things like that for charter companies. And we do research on them through the Department of Transportation and the DDS, and we know their accident records, we know their safety records, we know their vehicle inspection, and we put a list out there for our schools. And we don't try to peg it into a finite number, but anybody who I've basically gone through every charter company, and I guess they call some of them limousine services, who perform trips, long trips, charter buses, out of state, those kind of things. And if they qualified and they had good numbers and a good reputation DOT, we've listed those for our schools to choose from. And it's kind of, they have to have a certain amount of insurance when you're moving students in the state of Georgia, both liability, medical, and property. And I solicit their certificate of liability from each company. I keep it on file for the schools. And we probably have, out of that list of vendors and transportation providers, if they're not moving on our buses, probably have a list of 20. And I keep that up annually and make sure that we're keeping good, reputable companies, carrying the proper insurance that's required by the state law. And now, and I think I could, pretty easy determine which ones on that list are minority owned businesses. Outside of that, our major purchases where we would get into bidding processes are, it comes down to like 3 vendors available. So, it's not hard to do your searches on prices. It comes down to the small nuts and bolts part. We do maintain a vendor list that we've used, and then we do keep those prices in check by doing web searches and talking to other departments.
Okay. Board members, any questions for Mr. Harris?
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask Mr. Harris one question. Ms. Sue, did I cut you off?
No, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. But Todd, I wanted to ask, I've seen us kind of, I don't want to say scrambling for lack of a better term, but, there have been instances where we've had, academic teams, sports team that may have advanced to some type of level where they had to do some extensive traveling, and traveling on a school bus wasn't or would not be the first choice of transportation.
Yes.
Do we have I guess not a contract, but do we have any touring bus companies that we've talked with to try to give us some kind of rate? Because I see other schools, when they may, I just for instance, if they have a academic team or a sports team that may go to a state event, and they seem to travel in a little bit more comfortable accommodations than a school bus, and there have been school systems larger than us and smaller than us that have utilized it. Do we have anything in place in case that happens in our system where we need to have the scholars and them travel in something other than a school bus?
Ms. Thomas, yes, we do. And that list has a wide array of different options for schools. Now, I guess, make sure I understand the question. Are you asking me if we have maybe a preference or for a specific company that we say may give us a better rate? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just have some resources where they will, since we are educational institution, that they'll give us a better rate than they will, just private consumers.
And I tell you how, and the answer to that is yes, and it's probably not a formal process, but I'll tell you how we do it. When I solicit, I go through the Department of Transportation's qualifications, make sure their insurance is up to date, make sure they can legally move our students and they have a good safety record. We have gone as far as going out and visiting some shops just to see, if I got 3 buses sitting in the backyard and an engine hanging in the tree, we might have some concerns. So we want to see your maintenance facility. We want to make sure our kids are on good equipment. So, but to your question, when I solicit those certificates of liability from each company, it's an email list. They all see who got that email. So if it's certain company A, but I have notified them that, hey, if you're interested in being on our preferred vendor list and you want to talk about some rates, then they email me individually. And we do have 3 or 4 who said that if you, and it's not a contract, Mr. Holmes, but it's just kind of an agreement. They'll say, hey, if you'll kind of put us on your preferred list, we'll give you a 10, 12, 15% discount.
Okay.
And
I think that's great because, that's something that we ran into, and I think principals need to know that they have other options.
Right.
If that's possible, let them know, because they, some may and some may not seem to know that they have something like that available to them. All they got to do is contact you, and you can steer them in the right direction.
And there are specific events, playing for the state, you might want to, ride up in a little, I get that. And it's obviously it's additional cost, but yes, we do have a handful of vendors that will give us some discounts from their normal public rates.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Todd.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Any other board members have questions about what we are doing at the current time as far as gathering this information, what we have? Before you answer that, I don't feel as though we're going to have time to get into maybe giving some direction of additional things. So that's the part I'm going to encourage us to table to next week. But I want to make sure that you have all of the information or any questions about the information that has been given.
No questions. Just would like to, know when this will be back on the agenda for more discussion.
I'm anticipating, I'm thinking we can put together our thoughts on some direction to give them. And I would think next Tuesday on that agenda that we're able to give that to them. They then are able to take that information and see how they're able to make it work and then bring that back to us. I would think within a month or so. I mean, I want to keep moving on this. I don't want to just let it go.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
All right. So we will then table that to talk about next week, and we will move back to number 1, which was Miss Sarah Jones. I'm assuming she's joined us.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
And I believe, Joni, if you don't mind, I did send 2 documents. So board members, you have one sheet that I like to call the little cheat sheet y'all can look at that shows the curriculum audit indicators that are being updated, since there are so many within the actual document. But Joni, yes, thank you, if you don't mind. We'll work from this document here. Board members, y'all do have the 8 indicators that I'm going to review this evening that shows what we're going to look at, so you can find it in your document easily. So the first piece for the update. Again, you're familiar with this document, the color coding. If it's white, it has not begun. If it's yellow, it's in progress, and green means that it is complete. This is broken out based on the 10 recommendations and the governance indicators underneath each recommendation in the curriculum audit. And then on the far left, you will see of your document the months and the year in which this information was updated for the board members. So if you look over, you'll see, of course, April 2020 for this recent update. And the first one we'll go over is G14. And this one is regarding preparing and presenting the review of adoption drafts and revisions of new policies. This has been moved from yellow to green. We now have all policies that are being updated by departments, and that process is happening on an annual basis. So we wanted to give you the update that indicator has been completed. Joni, if you don't mind going to G38. And board members, please, if you have any questions, just interject and I'll be happy to try to answer those for you. If you see G38, this is working with the superintendent to create school board policies and administrative regulations requiring development, review, and revision. Again, while it's still yellow from the last update, the forward movement that you see over in the narrative, the update is the development and approval of policy is currently being worked on. So this is tied around the comprehensive technology plan. So while there's been forward movement on that, it is still not complete. So we just wanted to give you the update on that piece. Also, Joni, if you don't mind, G52.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Joni, can you go back to G38? I would like to know an example, since it says that the board will scroll up. No, there it is. Board, a BOE policy will be created when the updated technology plan is finalized. Could you give me an example of what will be in that plan, in that policy?
And so in the technology plan, and Lonnie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So on the, I think Mr. Brown is asking about the comprehensive technology plan and the monitoring of that implementation. Do you mind just telling a bit of where you are in that process and the update of our plan and that being brought forward to the board?
Sure. The biggest part of our update this year was focusing on the one-to-one. So we kind of got messed with the shutdown procedure. But all of this process, we implemented the one-to-one at schools where it was able. And we were tracking a lot of the usage, a lot of the data from student interactions, damage, repair procedures, so that we had a good idea of what it actually looks like, so that we could finalize it in the plan, in the technology plan, as far as the one-to-one component goes. Now, the technology plan also encompasses just our whole entirety of our network configuration, how it's laid out into schools, the amount of bandwidth that we're going to need to adequately serve all the different sites and how that's allocated. We also had measures in there about emergency closures, like due to inclement weather, and how we could implement digital learning. It also talks a lot about the professional development that we'll be offering throughout the course of the school year based on different survey data points and what we've implemented this year, and how the implementation of a lot of that professional development looks and where we need to do retraining or where we see a shift in learning going. Of course, now everything's a bigger focus with online learning, use of Google Classroom, and digital learning for students. And so we'll be, with the teachers engaging so much in that type of educational environment, we've gotten a lot of feedback about what people want more. And so we'll be including that in the finalization that should happen at the end of the school year with the technology plan.
Thank you. And also, just curious to know, I'm always been a person that's loved instruction as an educator myself. As it relates to the schools that we have, how many of those schools actually, before COVID-19, actually were on a one-to-one Chromebook type situation?
Most all of our elementary schools, 3 through 5, definitely. In a few of the elementary schools, they had sets in the kindergarten classrooms. They were more so also almost one-to-one in first to second, or a scattering. It kind of differed there. Our middle schools were one-to-one also. It's our high schools that had the bigger lack of devices. And a lot of that just had to do with how the schools chose to spend their title dollars towards helping to offset that the device shortage. But next year we will be fully one-to-one.
Sure. Yeah, because I saw that in the last maybe 2 meetings ago or 3 meetings ago where we had purchased some. So, all right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And, I'm sorry, Ronnie, go ahead.
Could I ask Mr. Lunny or you, Ms. Jones, a question?
Sure. Yes, sir.
You know, I know we've done a wonderful job gearing up to get these Chromebooks and become a little bit more technically savvy system wide. And mainly because of the COVID-19. But what are the plans after? I know we're not going to go back to normal. We're going to go back to a new normal. What are the plans with all this technology now that we have the kids equipped? How are things going to go forward after we get out of this crisis?
You know, and I'm sorry, Sarah, I'll jump in here unless you want to.
Well, and just a couple of pieces. Recently, Instructional Services Division met to talk about, funny you say, new normal. That was something we discussed and that was on our agenda in planning for the fall and the return. I think all of us are embracing that new normal, and even hearing teachers talk about, even down in the lower grades, how this has really impacted them instructionally in a positive way. So we've been discussing that piece as well. In coordination with this, prior to COVID-19, we were already in the works with Lonnie's department and being able to have a plan in place for inclement weather, and possibly having to use some of the learning pieces through Google Classroom, possibly, if for some reason we were shut down for other reasons. So while that was in motion, COVID-19 really just ramped up our ability to do so. So we are looking at what this means moving forward. And truly, Mr. Holmes, if we wanted to talk about rigorous curriculum design units, we have built in there heavy pieces of technology and Google Classroom use. That has been a point of use, honestly, already in our district for many of our teachers. And I know Lonnie can speak to that piece. Many of them we're increasing the use of taping instruction with our cameras in the classroom. And so those things have exponentially increased. And Lonnie, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in and share anything about those.
No, I will echo what you just said. Is the feedback has been great from teachers. We've done a lot of this in professional development. We've talked about it. People's tried using it, but this really pushed everybody in the district to just get their feet wet with the amount of technology that we have, and it's all been very positive. Our media specialists have done a great job of facilitating all this going on in the schools and keeping stuff in the front of the teachers. Everything coming back to them is teachers commenting, I didn't know we could do this. I love how easy this is to use, and we'll be doing this in the future. Especially with the upgrades that we have that will be going out at Ian Street, Moore, Atkinson, and Futrell with our classroom cameras, which is a much more user-friendly platform that will allow teachers to easily record instruction. We've started getting more requests from teachers on how do you record instruction to share that out to front load students before they come to class, or just as supplementary work when they're at home, where they can go back over what we did in class to remind them about stuff. So we're really excited about how that's going to look next year.
And Mr. Brown, if you don't mind, if I'd like to follow up to one of the things that you said, this is in recommendation 3 that really is all functions under an umbrella of comprehensive planning. And recommendation 3 then had 2 sub recommendations. It was our only recommendation that fleshed out differently in this way. The 2 sub recommendations, while they were about technology, one was about technology in supporting quality instruction with curriculum, and the other recommendation was about technology and facilities planning infrastructure piece. So when you heard Mr. Harper talking about the one-to-one, that was necessary in the sub-recommendation 3.1 in supporting that curriculum piece. So I just wanted to link that if when you do go back and look at the document, recommendation 3 does have the sub recommendations written up underneath it for your convenience there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank y'all. And if we're good, we'll go on to 5.2.
Okay.
5.2 was about the development, implementing regulations to provide specific direction to staff regarding purpose, scope, and approaches of assessing curriculum at all grade levels and subject areas, along with programs and interventions. This was yellow the last time I came before you. It is still yellow, but the update piece here is we were moving forward with the planning for Portrait of a Graduate and matching that to the targets in the build of the new 5-year strategic plan work. And while I know that that will continue at some point, COVID-19 put a little bit of a time wrench in that for us. So that's too why we kept this yellow, but we do have a significant amount of planning already in place to support Portrait of a Graduate work in alignment with strategic planning. So I wanted to share that piece with you. Also, 5.5, Joni, G 5.5. This is making explicit in policy programs and interventions to be evaluated annually. This piece has gone from yellow to green, and the update where schools and departments are all now using the program evaluation process with effectiveness methodology for all new federal and general fund requests. So when I brought that to you last time, if you remember, and even in years past, we were doing a rollout of that. Now all schools, all departments are using this process moving forward in the budget requests. So that is now green. Joni, the next piece is 5.9. 5.9 is about establishing administrative guidelines for program interventions designed for both general and subpopulations, including the requirement for effectiveness and intervention linkage. So if you look here, that was yellow last time we came to you. It is still yellow, but the forward progress here is the GSCS intervention website is continually being updated. GSCS MTSS handbook is finalized and in full use, and the intervention data that is still, it says has not yet been collected for the monitoring of effectiveness, but we now have MTSS reports that are coming out with all of the data pieces that we are monitoring. But the next piece we have to do is take the initiative that you have here, the actual indicator, and mark it against the actual overall effectiveness. So we've done a really good job in that, the reporting of that. Alicia McElroy and her department have done a fantastic job in doing all of those data updates to our principals and identified central office staff. So while that is still in progress, we have made forward movement there. And Joni, the next piece is 6.1.
Hey, Ms. Jones.
Yes, sir.
Hey, you mentioned in G5.9 regarding the subgroups and interventions. I have a question. A while back, I mentioned us focusing on subgroups as it relates to instruction. And one of the things that I was interested in, and maybe that the school district could do, would be, if we're looking at the subgroups, how each of the subgroups learn, and looking at instructional practices and looking at things that will help them. When Ms. Purvis back in December was giving the presentation as it relates to the data and how they were doing, I was concerned with the subgroups, especially looking at African-American males, African-American boys, and their learning and their scores. We know that there are some disparities in the achievement gap. And so when we talk about subgroups, we're talking about interventions. What are we doing to think outside of the box? Not stuff that is already done, but things that we're looking at, directly that impacts African-American boys in their learning, things that may impact females in their learning. What are we doing in those subgroups to close the achievement gap as it relates to G5.9?
Yes, sir. Well, with many of the pieces with MTSS intervention, when they have the teams that are together that are working to meet the academic or behavioral needs of students, they're looking, Mr. Brown, through the lenses of learning styles, and they're looking through, okay, this child is listed with us for an academic intervention, but honestly, after talking with the counselor, she shared with us that this particular child really doesn't understand the content, but doesn't want to participate in class because he's, doesn't want other students looking at him like he may not know. So looking at that, one of the recommendations came to, does he need an academic intervention alone, or does he also need a behavioral intervention? Does he need mentoring? Yep. Does he need to be part of the mentoring group? So when our teams come together, it's not just data on a page. They collectively, those grade levels, those departments come together and they look at the student information in totality to say, wait a minute, now this child on MAP scored this, or this child on Mastery Connect scored this, and I know his aptitude is more than what is showing here. We want him to retest. We try hard to look at meeting those needs collectively when we are going through each of the students. In regards to this specific information about subgroups that you brought to the attention of Ms. Purvis that she did share with me and I shared with Mr. Smith, that those are things that as part of the equity work that we are looking at as well, to be able to try to move forward in addressing meeting the needs of all students. But I will tell you, let me just say this. So when we're looking at academic intervention and we have students that are struggling with, their reading level, accessing content because like science and social studies content because of their readability level, we take all of the research practices that we know are true for helping struggling readers to attack that issue for them to access that content. So we do those best practices that are true for all students in that academic realm. Does that help in some of the
I definitely understand you. I definitely understand. And what I'm just saying is, I know in for example, as a classroom teacher, and going to a school that was failing, how we were able, but it was a all boys charter school. And so there were different things that we were able to do that helped them. And there were things that I was able to do as a teacher with indirect instruction and different strategies and different methods to be able to help them. And so, and I know whenever we start talking about race, everybody gets up in arms and alarmed and all this thing. But I just want to make sure that we are addressing all of the needs, and that as we look at closing the achievement gap, why not try something new?
Right.
See if it works.
And so I know part of that work also, when we talked about learning style inventories with interest inventories, we're finding certainly some of the things that you're saying, that you may find that, you know, many of our boys are putting different things on interest inventories that may really reach them in a different way than it may our females, or it may even change honestly by age. What a second grade girl may find of interest to help them in their learning style may be very different from when they are an 8th grader in middle school. So I know those are things that we're always trying to keep in the forefront. And when those teams meet on the individual students, they're trying very hard, Mr. Brown, to reach out and find anything that may bring the student forward, or bring them along to help them with any academic or behavioral struggle.
And I don't want us to get caught up on whenever you hear the word African American male or doing something for African Americans that you're going to throw in equity.
That I'm going to throw what?
That you're going to throw in equity. I'm talking about, and like in a lot of these conversations that we're having as it relates to the different instructional strategies, as it relates to contracts, it goes far beyond equity. It goes far beyond that. So we can't wait until we get an actual equity policy in place to start addressing these issues. And so as long as we are, as I see that you're doing in G5.5 and G5.9, that we're addressing them, I would just like to see things that are more addressed to the demographic of African American boys in their learning and how they get to those processes of learning the information.
And I hear you. I appreciate that very much. And I want you to also really know that my equity piece, whenever I mention equity, and I think Cabinet can attest to this, equity means a lot of things. Equity is not just in reference to African American students or African American males. And that's something that I talk to Cabinet about when I bring forward much of the work that's in instructional services. When we talk about equity across the board, I'm talking about equity and access. Much of what Lonnie just mentioned about one-to-one and having those consistencies among our school RCD with our curriculum, that is nothing but equity across the board. And so I don't want you to think that I'm only bringing that up in regards to conversation about African American students.
And I know that you understand that, but I think for some of my colleagues that and even including the superintendent, whenever that is mentioned, it's like, well, let's just put it on equity. Let's just wait till we start talking about equity. And I just want it to be clear. And I'm glad that you, as an educator, you definitely understand that.
I appreciate that information, and I'm trying to remember which indicator we were on. Joni, I think it was
6.1 now.
6.1 now.
And thank you, Joni. 6.1 is about revising and developing policies for alignment in the monitoring of curriculum. And that information has gone from yellow to green. So in January of 2020, policy GBI was approved on second reading, and GBIR has also been approved by Cabinet. So as we are going through all of our RCD meetings with principals that we have scheduled multiple times throughout the course of the year, it's helping us to monitor and also evaluate those curriculum delivery pieces. So that is green. And Joni, I think the next one is 6.9. And this one is about a yearly report to the board on the improvement of teacher monitoring. This piece has moved from yellow to green. The update here is the annual report to the Board of Education of the combined quarterly monitoring documents is given. And so that piece has been moved to green. And then
Sarah, going forward, is that going to be a particular time each year, or is it still going to be done quarterly?
Right now we haven't discussed making those more frequent. They're quite intense and involved, and it affords us the opportunity in a time frame to be able to look at first of year to October and October to December and make adjustments, which we do. We have a lot of heads at the table with the administrators and looking at, hey, this is successful here, but it's not successful here, or what we thought was going to work well, we've had an unexpected circumstance that has happened. What can we do to support it here? So we like the fact that we can have a good bit of data to bring to the table for that discussion, but we don't get too far in, like at the end of a semester where already half the year is gone. So in regards to the actual, that's in regards to the actual meetings, but for the updates to the board, I think it would always be most beneficial to have that in a time frame where at least one full semester is under the belt of quarterly meetings.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next one, Joni, I think is the last one, which is 7.5. And that is undertaking a system-wide effort to engage campus administrators, staff, and understanding of and support of students of all ethnicities and economic backgrounds to help reduce disparities noted in disciplinary actions and school dropouts. The update information here about the inclusivity training provided to all district leaders on February 20th of 2020 by ADL facilitators. Also inclusivity training provided to staff as part of the district professional learning on February 14th by ADL facilitators, and 2 sessions were offered here. You see that this indicator was yellow when we began. It's still yellow, but we wanted to give you an update on those pieces as well. And I think that was the last update that I had, unless there were any additional questions that anyone had.
Board members?
I'm good. Thanks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. Going through the lengthy document, I know is not always the easiest, so I do appreciate it. Thank you.
No, but I would like to say thank you very much for keeping us informed. Watching that this document is very important to me. It was presented when I first came on, and as we continue to see that green, we're going to, I think, continue to see the progress of our system.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Sure.
I want to thank Sarah for that update. The curriculum audit was a huge undertaking for the district, 4 years ago, I guess. And setting up documents like this to monitor our progress has been a major component. And I believe at least on a semi-annual basis, we've been able to bring these reports back to the board on our progress toward working into these recommendations that were made. And I think you can see the amount of green that's out there, the number of greens that are, Sarah has mentioned about yellow turning to green. You're seeing so much of this did not sit on the shelf, but actually has driven our work. And I think that's what's important about this. This has actually driven our work and the framework in which we do that work. And so I appreciate the board's support as we have worked through this. This has been a major effort for us, but I think you're correct. You're going to see the fruits of the labor here. You're already seeing some of it now. And you'll see more as we get this thing more ingrained into our school district.
All right. If we're good, then we're going to move on to senior recognition update with Dr. Warren.
Dr. Warren?
Okay, good.
There you
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to give you an update on the senior class of 2020, where we are in planning the activities. And first of all, I want to inform you that the survey that our seniors and their parents responded to, it closed on last Tuesday, April 21st at midnight. We appreciate and thank the seniors and their parents for providing input for the ceremonies. In total, there were 611 survey responses. The compiled data from both surveys include the following. 89% of the seniors and their parents prefer no virtual graduation and only a traditional graduation ceremony. Their preference for the month of the traditional graduation ceremony are as follows. June came in at 43%, July 38%, and August 19%. To honor the survey results of a traditional ceremony, we selected the last week in June for senior activities as follows. For graduation, and all these dates will be shared with you after today's meeting. For graduation, ACK, Thursday, June 25th. Spalding High School, Thursday, June 25th. ACK is going to be at 9:30 in the auditorium. Spalding High will be at 7 p.m. in the stadium. And Griffin High School will graduate on Friday, June 26th at 7 p.m. in the stadium. For our baccalaureate services, they'll take place, ACK and Griffin have a joint baccalaureate ceremony on Wednesday, June 24th at 7 p.m. at the First Assembly of God Church. And Spalding High School's baccalaureate will take place on Sunday, June 21st at 3 p.m. at First Baptist Church. Regarding senior honors night, they will take place AZK on Sunday, June 21st at 6 p.m. And for Griffin High School and Spalding High School, which will both take place in auditorium, Griffin High will take place on Tuesday, June 23rd at 6 p.m. and Spalding High School will take place on Monday, June 22nd at 6 p.m. The graduation task force will meet on June 10th to review guidelines from the Center for Disease Control, as well as our Georgia Public Health Department for gatherings and crowd size and location, and to make a final determination if the graduation ceremonies can still occur on June 25th and June 26th. If it isn't safe to conduct the traditional ceremonies in June, we're considering dates within the last week of July for the senior activities. So if not in June, we're looking at the last week in July. As previously shared, December is our final alternate month to conduct the activities of the CDC and Georgia Public Health guidelines make it not possible to safely have the traditional graduation ceremonies as well as the associated events. Two last points. The gyms at both Griffin High School and Spalding High Schools will be the location for inclement weather for the graduation ceremonies. Regarding tickets, if we're able to conduct the traditional graduation ceremony, we'll issue the number of tickets to adhere to social distancing guidelines to keep everyone safe, regardless of the location of the ceremony. So as you can see, we have 3 opportunities, June, July, and final December, to honor the wishes of our seniors and their parents for a traditional graduation ceremony.
Will we get a copy of this, or can somebody send that to us?
Yes, ma'am. It's going to be sent out after the meeting this evening. It'll be sent out.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we want copies now.
Mr. Chairman,
Any other questions, board members?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just
Sure.
give you one little piece of information. I received an email today from the event planner on the Spalding High Prom. He is going to be issuing a refund check that we should have by Friday, and Ms. Pruitt will be able to start refunding money back to the students and the parents that they had paid for their prom.
Thank you, Tim.
That's great news.
Is that a full refund, Tim, or a partial refund?
It's a full refund.
Oh man, I knew you got on that bone.
Just took a little convincing.
I know you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I make a recommendation? And I mentioned this last time we all were together, that I believe Mr. Shepherd needs to see these contracts before any of our schools get involved with something this big. Just to protect.
Wonderful idea, Sue.
Just to protect our schools and our all the people that are involved in planning these huge events for our kids. It's just, please let Mr. Shepherd look over this, because I just remember what he said about the contract, that, it just protected the provider, not the person that, signed the dotted line for their services. And I just feel like we need to protect our schools.
Wonderful suggestion.
I think that is, and for the vast bulk of our contracts, Tim does get to look at those, but these are some we need to make sure included in that list.
Sure.
So I agree with you. This is one that really kind of we need to be able to make that change.
Is that a policy change with regard to our high schools? Is that something that I don't know how that's done? So
let us look at that and see. I'm not sure it's in policy now, whether it needs to be, but we certainly can make that the practice and the directive that goes out, that all contracts will go through a certain process.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome. What happens is you'll put a faculty member in your prom or whatever, and they're the ones that'll end up getting the contract and they sign it. And
sure,
I've spoken with Miss Pruitt about it. In fact, as late as this morning, and she said that she has 4 or 5 contracts a year that comes through. I'm sure the same can be said of Griffin High.
Sure.
They're going to start running it.
Great. That's awesome.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Dr. Warren, before?
No, so that concludes my report.
Okay. Board members, we're at a place for some board member comments before we go into executive session. So I want to start at the bottom of my screen. So that gives Miss Barbara Jo Cook the first option. You have to unmute, Miss Barbara Jo. There you go.
All right. I just want to thank everybody for the terrific job you have done during COVID-19. It's just amazing to see the instruction that's going on, the remote working that's going on, the spirit that has pervaded all of this. It just makes you proud to be a part of this system. So kudos to all of you. Keep up the good work. We're all in this together. And if there's anything we can do to help you, please let us know.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes?
Mr. Dawes, I'm good, but I do want to acknowledge the technology department, Lonnie, and I know they've been in overdrive. And I just see that what we're going through is going to be something that really going to be a positive for us going forward with our scholars and our staff using the technology, because I know we have a lot more students engaged and parents engaged in what the students are doing in school now than we did before. So I think something that was intended for bad ended up for the good.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ms. McDonald?
I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Smith and the cabinet. I know that everyone going down this unknown path has worked very diligently and very hard. And I just, I've talked to several principals and they have spoken very highly of what's been going on, and they're very thankful for the people that are behind them and trying to get through this crisis. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Appreciate it.
All right. Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir. Same sentiments that my other board members have stated to technologies, Miss Joni, Miss Mullins, to Milani. Thank you guys so much for working hard to make sure that the scholars, stakeholders, parents are able to view these meetings in the comfort of their homes. Thank you for working with the board members and myself and everybody else included in making sure that our technology needs were met during this process. A big shout out to Dr. Warren and his team with secondary education and Dr. Kennedy with the graduation task force. Thank you guys so much for listening to the needs of the scholars. And lastly, just want to put in a plug. I'm a part of an organization called School Board Partners, and there are about 36 school board members across the country. I was fortunate enough to be a part of cohort 2. And in cohort 2 and cohort 1, we have sent an open letter to Congress as it relates from a coalition of American Public School Board members. We have a collective and diverse group where we are representing over 1.7 million scholars in public education. And so we wrote a letter to Congress as it relates to different things that can happen on the local level that will complement the CARES Act and provide critical learning support for the scholars and their families. And so I do plan on sharing that with my colleagues on the board and with everybody else so that you can see the work that we're doing, the things that are happening from our efforts of being able to advocate for the children, the scholars in our school district. And I want to remind everybody, if you have not completed your census, please go ahead and do that. Make sure you complete it, because the way that we're counting and the monies will have every direct impact on the population for those areas. So please, please, please go in and do that. Not to be too political, but the voting date has changed, June 9th. And so just want to keep everybody updated on the things that are going on around them. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
All right. And I too want to say thank you to everyone and the great job. Board members, I want to let you know we have a quick turnaround for our meeting next Tuesday. So I know Ms. Sue has turned in some items to me. If there's anyone else that have items that we'll be putting that agenda together for next Tuesday. So get those to me by in the morning if possible. Before, I guess at this time, I can entertain a motion to go into executive session. And I think the way that that's going to work when that's done is we will not be live any longer. And then all of the governance teams stay on the call and whoever else Mr. Smith needs in that session.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye.